Don't even play with me, okay? Hello friends, welcome to the Eerie Fairy Tales. My name is Leti, and today I have another tag video. I was tagged by the lovely Brooklin over at Brooklyn's Library. I'll pop her channel right here and I'll link it down below. Also down below, I will have linked the timestamps and chapters as usual. So with this tag, there are two prompts. The first one is 3 books that have destroyed you and 3 books that have revived you. I did actually have a couple books right off the top of my head, but then I really had to do some mental digging for the rest of the books. I like having questions like that really make you think about how the book affected you. I think part of the reason why it was a little tricky for me to answer these was I didn't want to include so many of the books that I've talked about in my recent wrap-ups. However, I did include one because I just can't help it. It was too perfect. I can't not include it. So how I will structure this video is going to be the 3 books that destroyed me and then the 3 books that revived me. Now the first book I'm going to talk about that destroyed me is a little controversial, mainly just because of the author, but I am going to separate that from the book itself. And that book is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. And this is a historical literary fiction with a little bit of a mystery element. And in this, we follow the main character Kaya since a young age through the 50s and 70s off the marshlands in North Carolina. And you start out following her being basically neglected, mistreated, and then abandoned by her family. And then she has to survive out on her own on the marshlands. That part was really sad. I don't know if I was just emotional when I was reading it, but that made me especially sad. Like even tear up a little bit, and that's not a normal thing for me. As she grows older, she gains the attention from a couple local boys. One ends up becoming a pretty close friend, and the other doesn't really have the best intentions, and that boy actually ends up being found dead, and Kaya is suspected of being guilty of this. So you follow that aspect of it. There's a little bit of like crime court element. Now, something that I really did enjoy about this book was the detailed descriptions of the geography. And in the front, you get a map of the area that she was living in there in North Carolina. Because she's living out on her own and living off the land, she ends up studying all the flora and fauna, and you learn a lot about it in that way. To aid in the immersion of the story, I listen to ambient sounds from the marshland. I do that with every book I read. I play either background music or ambient sounds in the background to match the book. I've always been able to find something to match every book I've read, and I always have a playlist of background music or ambient sounds linked in my description, so that will be down there today as well. And the second book that I have to talk about that destroyed me was The Stationery Shop by Marjan Kamali, and this is a historical fiction. This is set in the 1950s during the political turmoil in Tehran, Iran. And just look at that gorgeous cover. Oh my god, so beautiful. Now, this is a little bit of an unusual pick for me because at the heart of this is a love story. Not a romance, a love story. There is a difference. And in this, we follow a young girl named Roya, and she has a huge love of stationery and books, and she frequents a local stationery shop. And she discovers that the young boy with whom she kind of has a thing with, totally innocent, this is like young teen love, nothing really happens, it's just kind of like a crush thing, you know, like the very beginning stages of young love. She discovers that he frequents that store as well, and she ends up befriending the shop owner, and he basically helps her pass notes to this young boy. His name is Bahman. Bahman or Bahman. It's spelled Bahman. I probably should have looked that up. Anyway, the shop owner helps them pass notes between each other. They will leave them inside books. But again, this is during some political upheaval, and they were supposed to meet one day, and a huge riot breaks out and they weren't able to meet. And she doesn't know whether she got stood up or if he got killed or like what happened. And you find out at the end of the book what happened, and if you have a heart, it will be ripped out. Just forewarned. And if you're gonna read this book, I recommend reading Rumi poetry alongside it because Rumi is referenced all throughout the book and it really enhanced my reading experience. So I would recommend doing that as well. And the third book I have to talk about that destroyed me was Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. And this is a historical thriller. I read this book about 10 years ago and I still think about it. This book is set during the 1100s. Yes, that's right. It starts in 1123. That's like 900 years ago. But when I tell you the parallels between then and now, wow, it got me from the very beginning. There's so many similarities between how the men act in this time and current times. They're depraved, malicious, just violent. And this book, I remember it starts out intense. I remember thinking, wow, that's how it starts. And yeah, it's pretty much intense the whole time. I mean, there's some slower parts just because there's a lot of building of a cathedral going on, but I really enjoyed that, so that didn't bother me at all. In the story, we follow Tom the Builder, and as mentioned, he is helping construct a cathedral, and back then it took years, decades, basically, to build these things, so it was a pretty good job. It meant stability. As long as he could physically do it, he had a job to provide for himself and his family. So if you love medieval settings or architecture or both of those things, you may really like this book. It is a bit of a chunky one. It's 973 pages, so it's a little bit of a commitment, but in my opinion, well worth it. And this book inspired one of my poetry or spoken word pieces, so I thought I might as well share that with you. I do have this memorized, but it's maybe 2 or 3 minutes long and I don't want to mess that up, so I'm just going to read it. It's called Knights in Shining Horror. Formulate prominence, indulgent mediocrity, unjust obedience to violent dominance, treacherous technique, reluctant to retreat, battered wings intertwine scattered strings, echoes of expression, interjects ego's possession, unveiled failed attempted lesson, hands clenched, untamed trigger itch, shifty eyes drenched in petulant arrogance, guilty of insolence in the first degree, sideshow freaks sold out front row seats, comical fools playing both sides of the duel, reigning with fear to acquire buried jewels, bearing burdens of what is sought, an epiphany of tyranny dreams real life brought, an open mind, closed eyes, see the third is rising higher, balance on a barbed wire, then plummet, just for the hell of it, into a sandpit fortress, a ruckus of puppets, drowning in an assaulting sound of upside-down revelry multiplied inner sanctum petrified, breaking bricks of that yellow road, a ponderous load, tricks of trade paid for in fake gold, calculate confession, reverent blasphemy, undone obsession of legend's ascension, malicious method, corrupted to the core, beady eyes initiate will's demise, life suppression, progressed by weapons of starvation, ignored again unanswered question, silk silhouette, satin tourniquet, stealth passion assassin marionette, ignorant threat, hazardous Lazarus sleepwalking daily brain draining, cavernous wasteland, idle hands conniving in empty pockets, lost attention, no apprehension of comprehension, eyes dissolved into despondent sockets, no mercy, all civilities forgotten, grim reaper posing as savior, cashing on a favor in a somber chamber, explanation is beyond, blame it on a man-made god, convenient excuse for aberration, beaten innocence into submission, permission begins, decomposition. Chivalry crumbles under vile schemes, dilapidated dreams, basic necessities arrive luxury, precarious states fluctuate, actuate nefarious demeanor, much too eager. Gate watchers demand surrender, relentless hostility, raping scenery and its keepers, obey or pay, pick the poison, life with haggard hope or death with jagged rope, low class, outcast fast, infringement of freedom. Peasants of a fallen kingdom, blurred vision, quest for power, surge of fricks and serves, bloodlust to the bone rewarded, home swarmed at dawn, burned to the ground, epic battle, rebel cry, quickly stricken down, no roses, only thorns scorned, the path to the gallows a shallow foundation, curses firstborn, nepotism won, endless chasm, armor worn to inflict harm, alliances form, corrosive charm, forever an endeavor of grave mistakes enslaved, contemplate the fate of no escape. Speaking of poetry, we're gonna get into the books that revived me. Now, this would be a current revival since I haven't quite finished it. This is poetry. It's called Devotions by Mary Oliver. I read a little bit of poetry every weekend when I'm having my coffee and breakfast. And these are selected nature poems from Mary Oliver's work through several of her different publications. They are full of light and happiness, introspection, observation, insights, and gratitude. And if you are a lover of flora and fauna and poetry, I think you would really enjoy this. And I'll just share one of my favorites. I have tabbed a few, but I'll just share one for now. And it's called What Gorgeous Thing. I do not know what gorgeous thing the bluebird keeps saying, his voice easing out of his throat, beak, body into the pink air of the early morning. I like it, whatever it is. Sometimes it seems the only thing in the world that is without dark thoughts. Sometimes it seems the only thing in the world that is without questions that can't and probably never will be answered. The only thing that is entirely content with the pink, then clear white morning, and gratefully says so. Yes, very beautiful. Again, if you love nature and you just want to be put in a good, grateful mood, then I would recommend this. And this next book is going to look familiar because it was in my recent October wrap-up, but it just fit too well. I could not include it. And that is Cackle by Rachel Harrison, and this is cozy horror. So in this, we follow a young lady who just broke up with a longtime boyfriend. She moves to a small town to basically start over. She ends up befriending a witch, and it follows the adventures from there. There's a lot of talk of food and drink in this, as well as a super adorable animal companion. And it's just a really good, cozy read. So you follow the main character as she adjusts to her new life and finally comes to peace with it. I could really relate to the main character, and I just felt really content while reading it. Now, I did go over this a little bit more in depth in my October wrap-up, so I will link that below. And in that video, I did share some of my favorite quotes from the book. Now, that is what sold me on this book. This book was initially on my radar, and then in the reviews, I saw a bunch of the quotes that had been highlighted, and I was like, I need that right now. So, highly recommend going back to watch the video and listening to some of those quotes, and if they just hit for you, then I highly recommend getting this because it's even better than that. And the third and final book that revived me is actually a series, and that is the manga series Spy Family by Tatsuya Endo. In this, we follow three characters, a spy, an assassin, and a telepath. Now, the spy is tasked with acquiring a family, a wife and a child, because he basically needs to use the child to enroll in a private school in order to get access to an otherwise elusive target. So he is a spy, but he doesn't know that his wife is an assassin and that his new daughter is a telepath. And they each have their own reasons for needing to have this fake family, and so they each keep the charade going for their own reasons. I like to read this when I just need something light and fun because it always puts me in a better mood. This you don't want to take too seriously. It kind of pokes fun at some tropes. I've read 6 of the volumes so far. I do have number 7. I think they have up to 10 or 11 released now in the US. I'm not 100% sure. I know at least 10 though. If you want something light, fun, easy, something you don't have to take too seriously, something that's going to make you giggle, highly recommend Spy Family. I will tag just a few channels. However, if you're watching this and you want to do this tag, please do so. And then tag me in your description or something. That way I know and I can come watch it. I'm going to go ahead and tag a Virgo Rising Reads. And the answer is Books, Danny Dabbles, and Giant Cup of Coffee. So if you're not subbed to them, I highly recommend going to check out their channels. And if you've made it this far, please leave a bird emoji in the comments to represent the nature poetry. And I would love to hear what books destroyed you and what books revived you as well. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.